That for me. Cheers. I was told to report to the Endeavour, one of the Lee Cockling boats. I would have preferred if it was a bit bigger, but the crew knew what they were doing. There were 4 of us in total. The skipper, Fred, told me that when the Admiralty asked to requisition his boat, he thought it was a joke. It was the talk of Old Lee that night. In total, 6 local boats had been requisitioned by the Admiralty. They were the Resolute, the Reliance, the Renown, the Letitia, the Defender, and of course the Endeavour. The skipper told me that none of the lads were really happy with their boat being taken away. If they lost the boat, they lost the work, and then what? But I don't think any of them were really prepared for what they were going to be up against. Everyone was on edge. It didn't help when a naval rating on the Renown accidentally installed the deck hatch upside down. That really worried the Thamesmen. Many of the fishermen had a hard time deciding whether or not to go. Anyone with children wasn't allowed to go at all. Apparently there was one lad who knocked himself out before he could even get on the boat. Poor lad. I had to find someone to replace him. Once we reached the pierhead, we were given drums of fuel and enough rations to tide us over until we got there, and any boats that needed extra deckhands were given them when they needed. At noon, on the last day of May 1940, our flotilla set out to cross the Channel under our own power. The crew of the Endeavour knew how to sail on the Thames, but not on the open sea. Once we reached the North Sandbank at the mouth of the Thames, we took a line from the Defender. Just after 2, our flotilla passed Margate Roads. There we were told to proceed straight to Dunkirk. There were literally hundreds of private craft going from Margate, and the line went on as far as I could see. We were slow, though, only reaching about 6.5 knots. It was just after 6 o'clock in the evening when the first attack came. We scattered when a flight of enemy Dorniers opened up on us with their guns. Thankfully, our lads from the RAF swooped down in their Spitfires and splashed at least 5 of the buggers. I hit the deck as a curtain of shells descended. Seeking cover behind a sandbag, briefly I glimpsed the eastern mole, rearing above us, at low tide, like a liner's hull. When I looked again, I saw in consternation that the mole was receding. The skipper had turned the ship back to Dover. I stumbled after him and asked what he was doing. He said, "We can't go through that. It would be suicide. We can't be expected to." I just told him straight. It may seem strange, but that was exactly what we were expected to do. Naval discipline won't permit me to return empty-handed, and while you're fine to leave, you can't exactly drop me off in the middle of the Channel. The first shock passed. The skipper saw where his duty lay. He pulled himself together, and soon the Endeavour was heading back for the mole. You could see it for miles due to the huge pools of smoke from the burning oil on the shore. First off, we were sent onto the long flat beaches, where the big ships couldn't reach or they'd have been grounded. When we dropped anchor, we couldn't believe how many men were on that beach. Thousands and thousands of them, all lined up, snaking out into the water. You could see all the kit they had been told to discard laying neatly on the foreshore. All hell broke loose when a jerry plane came over and strafed the beach. There was hardly any warning. It moved so quickly. One man would point, and then the whole lot of them scattered like a flock of birds when a gunshot goes off. There was no cover for hundreds of yards, so you just had to dive to the sand or a bomb crater if you got lucky. The sound of wing cannons firing and the sight of double-line bullets hitting the ground would be enough to make anyone feel helpless. When the attack was over, the men seemed to dust themselves off and slot themselves neatly back into their place, waiting to be rescued. Every time there'd be men who wouldn't get up. The mates would check on them and call for a stretcher bearer, or say a quick prayer before going back into their place. We could only take about 20 men each time. Mostly Army, but there were some Navy and Air Force in there too. The destroyers were pretty much useless. We were the ones that had to load up, sail out, drop off and repeat as many times as we could. Eventually, the tide ran out so far, even with our shallow draft, we were at risk of grounding. We were ordered over to the harbour to pick troops off the jetties there. We had to pick our way past a sunken destroyer to get there. At first, the men on the jetty seemed reluctant to get onto our boat. We could hardly blame them. There was a 4-foot swell and no ladder to help them get on, but we were all there was and that was that. The drifters Sarah Hyde and Ben and Lucy were in the middle of the harbour, and we took troops out to them like we had off the beaches. Eventually, we were called off and took a last load of lads to go with us. On the way out, our rudder was smashed by one of the steel crosses the Jerrys had planted. We got a tow from the Sarah Hyde, one of the larger ships. Similarly, the Renown had their engine busted, so they got a tow from the Letitia. We were gliding up the Belgian coast, cheating the tide. After all the noises of the gunfire, the explosions, the shouting and screaming, it was almost peaceful. I heard afterwards that no one even saw the mine that blew the Renown to smithereens. Apparently they found the skipper of the Letitia clinging to the end of the tow rope. Apparently he couldn't speak. Poor bugger. No one even knew about it until we got home. The Reliance, the Resolute and the Defender ended up in Ramsgate because there was no other larger vessel to take the men off their ships. 180 extra men they had on those tiny decks. At HMS Lee, the Lee crews were discharged, and I was sent back to my billet at HMS Westcliff. I was so tired I could barely get myself there. It was only later on that I found out that none of the Renown crew had made it back home. What really gets me, Mum, is that they'd only gone out there to save lives, not fight, and they were so close to home.